The small-town mayor of Emo, Ontario is fighting back against LGBT activists, and the fight is heating up. So those of you who listened to the Bridgehead briefing will know that last month the Ontario Human Rights Commission ordered the township of Emo to pay the LGBT activist group Borderland Pride $10,000 for refusing to make a Pride proclamation in 2020. And actually, Mayor Harold McQuaker was personally ordered to pay $5,000 as well as take a re-education course offered very kindly by the Human Rights Tribunal entitled Human Rights 101. Now, we covered the original story in a previous episode. We'll drop that in the comment section for those of you who want to take a look. But there's a new development in this case that's worth covering for a couple of reasons. So Mayor Harold McQuaker flatly refused to actually pay the fine. And when the Toronto Sun asked him if he would either pay the fine or take the re-education classes, the 77-year-old mayor was very blunt, and here's what he said. Absolutely not. I will not be extorted, which is precisely the right response when you're facing activists who want to force you to proactively affirm their ideology. So he also stated that he would not be hosting a drag queen story hour at the local library, which was one of the demands laid out in an open letter published by Borderland Pride previously. Now, just to give you a little bit of background, again, for those of you who missed the previous coverage of the story, Emo Township is a very, very small town. It's just over 1,200 people, located 380 kilometers west of Thunder Bay. And now the township has to decide whether or not they're going to pay the LGBT activist group as demanded by the Ontario Human Rights Commission, or whether they're going to refuse to do so and then attempt to appeal the decision. That decision has not yet been made as of recording. Maybe we'll have news on whether or not that decision has been made by the time this airs. But as of right now, the council hasn't actually made up their mind on whether or not they're going to take this further or whether or not they're simply going to pay the fee demanded by the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal. But Harold McQuaker made up his mind. He said, I utterly refuse to pay the $5,000 because that's extortion. I have a lot of respect for our four councillors. We have a special meeting of council, and they will decide that and what to do next, either pay the fine or appeal the fine. McQuaker grew up in the area. He owned a construction company there for 50 years. He's a great-grandfather, and he cannot be pushed around very easily. And I think that he's a really important figure to emphasize here, just because one of the reasons the LGBT activist movement has managed to steamroll so many small towns is because it's just a lot easier for most people to just give up and give them what they want. Because otherwise, they end up paying the kind of penalty that the town council and the mayor of Emo are facing right now, which is you've got a lawyer who runs Borderland Pride and is using all of his skill sets, all of his contacts to make life as miserable as possible for this handful of people in this very tiny town. But McQuaker basically said that he's not going to buy any of this. I will not pay the $5,000 I have been fined, and I will not take the training. The council will decide on the fine levied to it. I did not do anything wrong. If anybody needs training, it is the LGBTQ2+ to quit pushing their weight around and making the demand that people can't live with. Now, ironically, this is an aspect of the story I didn't cover last time. The Emo Town Hall doesn't even have a flagpole. But that didn't matter to Borderland Pride, which has, in addition to their other demands, stated that it expects a written apology as well as, quote, diversity and inclusion training for council and a commitment to adopt Pride proclamations in the future without stripping out their 2S LGBTIQIA plus affirming language. There's two I's in there now. Okay. I don't know what this new acronym means. But anyways, it keeps on getting larger. But they insisted that despite their lack of a flagpole, the LGBT flag could have been displayed somewhere else, such as in a window or on a counter in the municipal office. So it doesn't really matter if there isn't a flagpole. This flag should just be displayed somewhere prominently, like a window or a counter. And this story is so ridiculous that it actually picked up international attention because, again, this is a small town, 1,200 people in the middle of nowhere, Ontario, and the council just didn't want to make a Pride proclamation affirming an ideology that obviously some of them don't subscribe to. And because of that, not because they actually posted a statement in opposition to LGBT ideology, not because they proactively stated that they don't like the LGBT movement or disagree with this or that aspect of the LGBT agenda. No, just because they refused to fly a flag on the flagpole they don't have, and because they wouldn't issue a proclamation, thereby keeping the town council neutral. And so Sky News in Australia ran a 10-minute segment actually making fun of Canada, which of course is something that's been happening quite a lot lately, considering the fact that our current Prime Minister likes to make appearances at Pride events and clutch drag queens and attend very solemn flag raisings on Parliament Hill, which kind of gives you an idea of who actually runs our country. Now, McQuaker emphasized that he doesn't hate anyone and that he will not tolerate accusations being leveled at him by this group, Borderland Pride. He said, "I am a husband to a wife for 51 years, father of 2, a grandfather of 7, and a great-grandfather of 1. I consider myself a very reasonable person and a good leader for our community, and I would have a lot of support if there was an election." But of course, that's one of the reasons that the LGBT movement uses things like the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal and tries to go through the court system, because they recognize they don't have a lot of grassroots support for a Pride proclamation in a place like Emo, Ontario. And instead, what they do is they leverage lawfare in order to bully the town council and, of course, bully in specificity here the mayor. And in response, Doug Judson of Borderland Pride, he suggested that the mayor should actually be happy to learn from the LGBT group. So he says that basically this Human Rights 101 case, this is a real opportunity for Mayor Harold McQuaker to open his mind a little and to learn all about the LGBT movement. Here's what Judson wrote. The law actually requires that the mayor participate in and foster activities that enhance the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the municipality and its residents. Part of showing this kind of community leadership is to set the tone for civil debate and demonstrate a willingness to learn and adapt one's perspective on issues that, for various reasons, they may have a more limited understanding. It seems obvious enough that the mayor does not have many ties to the queer community. I wonder why a great-grandfather who's been married for 51 years and ran a construction company in the area didn't have strong ties to the queer community. We hope that the training that was ordered by the tribunal will assist him in moving his leadership role forward. Now, consider how ridiculous this is for a minute. A mayor is responsible to be neutral to some degree or another, because obviously his municipality will include people of a wide range of different religious beliefs or no religious beliefs, different worldviews, and different ideologies. And so in that role, there is a certain responsibility that he has. But the idea that this role requires that he have, how does Judson put it here, ties to the queer community, and that he positively affirm an ideology that he obviously doesn't hold, is something else entirely. And it's important to identify that, because this whole thing is being passed off by Borderland Pride as a matter of tolerance, which we're going to get to in a minute. We're going to get to the tolerance of Borderland Pride in just a minute. But that's not what this is about at all. This is about, again, positive affirmation of a specific ideology. Because any kind of religious group under this theory could come forward and say, we want you to make a proclamation for our group positively affirming our values. And there's a significant number of, say, churches or clubs in this municipality that holds these views. And as residents in this municipality, we have the right to have our mayor make a proclamation that reflects our values. And I'm sure Judson would disagree to any number of proclamations that the mayor might be asked to make. But of course, when it comes to his personal views, everything changes. But Judson and his LGBT activist buddies hope that forcing the 77-year-old mayor of a small town to take re-education classes to forge ties to the queer community, because they hope he'll be a good boy from now on and do whatever he needs to do, and to do what they demanded that he do the first time. And they've already taken a bunch of steps toward this, because as it turns out, according to the Toronto Sun on December 7, the mayor who stood up to the Pride group actually had his bank account garnished. So let me read to you here from the Toronto Star. Although the Northern Ontario municipal leader vowed not to honor a $5,000 fine the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario levied against him for comments surrounding town council not approving a motion to approve Pride Month, he wasn't given a choice. In fact, the winner of the judgment that McQuaker called extortion has boasted that it has already gone into his bank account to collect the money. Here is what the Borderland Pride post said on Facebook. It's still there when I last checked. Sure, sex is great, but have you ever garnished your mayor's bank account after he publicly refused to comply with a tribunal's order to pay damages? So that, in case you missed it, is Borderland Pride basically saying that forcing a 77-year-old mayor to pay $5,000 by taking it out of his bank account because he wouldn't endorse a proclamation that endorsed your sex life is apparently better than sex. I'm not sure what orientation that is, but it'll probably show up in the acronym imminently. So it seems like they really are enjoying what they're doing here. And they've made a whole bunch of statements to the press. Borderland Pride said in an email to the Toronto Sun, Mayor McQuaker's comments in the Toronto Sun and other media were very clear that he did not respect nor intend to comply with the tribunal's orders. Consequently, it was apparent that he would not voluntarily make payment of the damages ordered. We took immediate action to garnish his bank account. Borderland Pride said, the garnishment was issued by the court and delivered to the CIBC in Emo, which is the only bank in that community, and there is no hearing or application to issue a notice of garnishment. It is a service provided at the court order or online once a person has an order for the payment of money. So as of right now, as of recording time, the town council hasn't even made the decision as to whether or not they're going to pay the fine or whether they're going to appeal it. McQuaker was obviously planning to appeal it, and instead Borderland Pride just actually had the tribunal or had got a court order sent to the bank and demanded they remove $5,000 from his bank account and hand it over to them, which is what happened. Borderland Pride added, orders of the tribunal can be enforced in the same manner as any civil judgment for the payment of money. We intend to ensure that the tribunal's orders are complied with. Now, I'll quote what Warmington said in the Toronto Sun here, Joe Warmington, because I think he makes a good point. He said, cancel culture is canceling this mayor and digging into his personal savings. On a weak premise that there is discrimination of LGBT people there, the enforcement is harsher than most violent criminals receive. It seems like a heavy-handed, undemocratic move, not to mention a violation of personal finances and cruel and unusual punishment. It is also a slippery slope. The state using legal instruments to take from one person and give to others amounts to communism and authoritarianism that should scare every citizen. First, we saw government and banks freezing accounts of pandemic lockdown protesters, seizing donations to crowdfunding sites, and now in woke Canada comes word that they can actually raid bank accounts too. A creeping police state is what should be cancelled, not a venerable village mayor. Just because people get the whip hand on somebody does not mean they need to wield it. Power is not power when it's abused. Restraint and fair play is power. So I think he's absolutely correct. I think it's a good wake-up call for everybody to recognize how many levers and how many tactics that the government actually has at its disposal when it wants to essentially discipline somebody. Again, I want to emphasize here, this proclamation was not even counteracted. It's not like there was an anti-LGBT proclamation that went out from the town council. They're getting targeted simply because they refuse to proactively affirm an ideology they do not agree with. And for that, the bank took money out of the mayor's bank account and turned it over to the LGBT activists, who are essentially targeting him and extorting him just to make a point. Now, there's a few other aspects to this witch hunt that I think bear mentioning, because obviously a lot of the really high-minded rhetoric that you see Borderland Pride using has been carefully tailored for public consumption. So Doug Judson of Borderland Pride has made a series of statements to the press. He's talked to, I believe, the CBC, but he submitted a long series of answers to the Toronto Sun as well. And then they're talking about tolerance and the fact that Mayor Harold McQuaker said that there wasn't a straight pride flag and there was a gay pride flag, and so in order to remain neutral, they weren't going to fly any flag. That apparently was wildly offensive, despite the fact that it's clearly indisputably true. And if you want to know what Borderland Pride is actually all about, though, if you want to get a taste for what their tolerance actually looks like, spending a few minutes on their Facebook page, I think, is actually a really good way of getting a glimpse at what goes on behind the very carefully tailored media comments. So here's one post from Borderland Pride. We'll put it up on the screen here, but it portrays a steamroller with the roller having all of the different rainbow colors on it from the LGBT flag, and it's running over a bunch of screaming little people who are identified as Christian values, traditional family, sanctity of marriage, etc., etc., maybe as a 77-year-old great-grandfather who just refuses to make any statement whatsoever. And so that gives you kind of an idea of what their version of tolerance looks like. And the caption was, "Who's ready for Monday?" And I guess what you do on Monday is you metaphorically steamroll traditional family, Christian values, and the sanctity of marriage with, I assume the steamroller is Doug Judson and the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal. Here's another couple of comments. One comment was made on one of the posts here. Actually, that one's got too much swearing. Let me shift to another one. Another meme that Borderland Pride posted and notified as in Emo. They basically posted another meme that has Emo Town Council looking at devastating, predictable litigation loss, and then Pride offer to donate to end Emo Library. By the way, what's interesting, I need some context for this meme. The reason that one's interesting is because they didn't offer to donate money to the library. They basically said that we'll give you some of the money we get from the judgment, we'll give it to the library if you host Drag Queen Story Hour in the library. So if you're willing to host an event where adult entertainers, drag queens, read to little kids, then we'll give you some money for that. So this is obviously complete garbage. And their caption for that one was, "We warned them. We even offered to donate funds to the Emo Public Library to resolve the matter, and they didn't want to listen." So yeah, we'll give some money to your library on the condition that you invite drag queens to read to kids in the library. Here's another one that you can take a look at. They're on a meme posting spree. This one says, "We could do this all day." Here's another one of them holding a sign that says, "Make emo gay again," just in case you were wondering as to what their actual goal with this was. Besides forcing re-education, they want to make emo gay again. I'm not sure emo was gay to begin with. It seems pretty clear based on the decision the town council and the mayor made that there's no again. So that sign, to be more accurate, should just be "Make emo gay." Here's another comment that they posted, which is what I think worth taking a look at. We'll put that one up on the screen. And then they posted a few more targeting the mayor. They keep on making all these posts bragging about having garnished the account. I'm not sure what this one's all about. This is about a new orientation called Lesbrarians. I'll let the audience make up their mind what that's all about. But anyways, Borderland Pride wants you to know about them because they're posting it on their page. And yeah, so there's just basically a big victory lap going on here. There's a few of the most egregious comments. I'm having to leave out 5 or 6 of the other comments because when they basically said that taking $5,000 from the bank account of the mayor of a small town was better than sex, that's actually the least graphic thing that they said. There's plenty of other really profane and really disgusting statements that they made in which they graphically describe having sex in public and things like that. I won't bore you with the details. But this is something I think that is a good wake-up call. It's always really interesting to see what they say when they think they're amongst friends and when the mask actually comes off. They're using bully tactics. Those bully tactics have been pretty effective. But what I think is really interesting about this turn of events, a couple of really interesting things to point out here just to kind of summarize this story, where the story is at. There should be more developments to the story coming. But where the story is at now, I want to just point out a couple of things. First, Canada needs a lot more people like Mayor Harold McQuaker, people who just refused to knuckle under, and people who refuse to accept extortion. He can be forced into it by the courts, but his dignity is intact, and his principles and his convictions are intact. He consistently maintains that he hates nobody, but he will not be taking re-education, and he accurately noted that actually it's these LGBT people who need education. They need education on how to actually be tolerant, as the meme of their rainbow steamroller crushing Christian values and the sanctity of marriage indicates. Second of all, I'm not sure if this has ever happened in Canada before. If anybody knows of another instance, please make a comment and point me to that case where you have somebody who refuses to overtly support the LGBT movement, has a ruling against them, and then gets their bank account proactively garnished as a result, where they go into this person's bank account and remove some of his own money. I think that's unprecedented. If it's not, please do correct me. But that's a pretty scary development and one we should take notice of, because it's another tool that's in the state's toolbox. And this is the way that they force ideology, because this isn't really just about Mayor Harold McQuaker here. What this is really all about is an LGBT group sending a message to other small town mayors. And big city mayors for that matter, which is, if you don't do what we say, we will come after you with our lawyers. We'll probably win. And when we win, even if you refuse to cooperate, we can go right into your bank account and take money. We can go right into your bank account and take money. And I think that's really important for us to recognize as well. And three, finally, to conclude, what does tolerance actually look like? Well, if you are of strong stomach and sound mind, you can go to Borderland Pride's Facebook page if they don't block everybody after this, and you can take a look at what they said for themselves. But just a few examples that I've given you, I think, kind of sum this up. That this is a movement that's committed to a specific ideology. Many Canadians, for good reason, disagree with it. And the things that they said, I think, by any decency standard, are crude. They are definitely intolerant. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that if a Christian posted a meme that had a steamroller with a cross on the steamroller and then labeled all the little people LGBT activists and gay values and Borderland Pride, that if we posted that meme, I'll bet that we would end up back at the Human Rights Tribunal and that we'd be forced to pay a big fat fine for which we would have our bank account garnished. And so it's always handy to see what would happen if you flip this. What if Harold McQuaker posted a meme in which a Christian labeled steamroller, decided to crush Borderland Pride? I think we'd all collectively agree that this is violent, incendiary rhetoric. I think we'd all collectively agree that that's not something that should be posted, that it's not actually a reflection of tolerance. It's not a reflection of loving your neighbor. I think Christians and LGBT activists could collectively agree that that would be in very bad taste at minimum, and at maximum incendiary and an incitement to violence. But Borderland Pride can do it in the process of accusing their ideological opponents or neutral observers of being the ones who are intolerant and those in need of re-education. And so we're not up against tolerant people. We're up against people who obviously very much despise Christian values, make no secret of it, and currently they're winning. We'll find out soon what the council decides, but what I want to just end with again is Canada needs more mayors. More people in general, like Harold McQuaker. We see poll after poll on many of these issues indicate that Canadians are completely fed up with this. And what they're looking for is people who are willing to stand up. And I think a great example of this is somebody like Dr. Jordan Peterson. Right? Dr. Jordan Peterson, everybody talks about his books now and his big long lectures and his psychological examination of the Bible and all that kind of stuff. But the reason he got rich and famous is because he just had a line he wouldn't cross. He just refused point blank to use preferred pronouns. He said, I will not engage in compelled speech. And this is essentially what Harold McQuaker said too. I will not engage in compelled speech. And overnight, Jordan Peterson became a celebrity because that kind of courage is attractive to an enormous amount of people. So I hope we'll see more like him soon. Anti-Christian bigotry in Canada has become so obvious that Vice President-elect JD Vance recently called it out on X. Now, why was JD Vance commenting on church burnings going on in Canada? Well, it started with a video posted on December 3 by Jamil Jivani, who is the Member of Parliament for Durham. And he released a video announcing the launch of his new petition at Protect Christians in Canada. And he posted it to X with the caption, I'm sounding the alarm. We must protect Christians in Canada from governments and corporations abusing their power in our country and from anti-Christian bigotry. I'll present this petition in Ottawa in the new year. So here's that video to give you a sense of what Jamil Jivani had to say.
Jamil Jivani here, Member of Parliament for Durham. I'm sounding the alarm. We need to do more to protect Christians in Canada. Now, when you see a Christmas tree like this in Parliament, you might think that's a sign of respect for Christians. But what good is a Christmas tree here in Parliament when you have a federal government that will not lift a finger to protect Christians from governments and corporations abusing their power? What good is a Christmas tree here in Parliament when you have a federal government that will not fight anti-Christian bigotry in Canadian institutions? We've got to take action now. We need to defend parental rights of mothers and fathers. We need to defend conscience rights of unionized and non-unionized workers, including healthcare professionals. We have to stop the crime spree targeting churches, including arsons and vandalism, and we need to defend the legal status of Christian charities and the freedom of expression of Christian churches. The time for action is now. Make your voice heard. Take a stand. We're launching a petition today at protectchristianscanada.com. I'm asking you to go on that website, and if you agree with me that we've got to do more to protect Christians in our country, please sign and share that petition. Take a stand. Make your voice heard. We're going to be presenting that petition at an event here in Ottawa in February of next year. And between now and then, we need as many people as possible to show support for the Christian communities in our country. This is not about forcing other people to live according to Christian values, no. This is about whether Christians in Canada have the freedom to live according to their own traditions and to practice their own faith without corporations and governments engaging in overreach. The time is now, ladies and gentlemen. That is why I'm sounding the alarm. Visit protectchristianscanada.com. Thank you. God bless you.
So those of you who listen to the Bridgehead briefing or our videos regularly will recognize that what Jivani's saying there is not an exaggeration. We've been covering stories consistently on what often seem like very small examples of discrimination against Christians, but taken cumulatively really show that Canada is becoming an increasingly anti-Christian place. And so I recommend Jivani's petition to all of you, just to give you an idea of what he's calling on the government to do specifically. The website says, defend the rights of parents to play a leading role in their children's education and important decisions involving their children, safeguard conscience rights and the freedom of religion for unionized and non-unionized workers, strengthen penalties and increase law enforcement in response to crime targeting churches and places of worship, and then, as he said at the end of that video there, protect the legal status and freedom of expression of Christian charities. Now, that last one would be a reference to Justin Trudeau's attack on crisis pregnancy centers, which we covered in a previous episode. The conscience rights and freedom of religion that he's referring to refers to the fact that there's a debate in Canada about whether or not healthcare workers should be obligated, compelled to refer for things that they believe to be wrong, such as euthanasia, abortion, or contraception. And so conscience rights are obviously incredibly important there. And so I think that this petition calls for much needed action. And there's a lot of people saying, well, these attacks aren't actually happening. This is just Christians getting a persecution complex. So I'd like to show you one video just giving you an idea of where the LGBT movement is at. Because people might say parental rights aren't under attack at all in Canada. Again, I think those of you who follow this show or maybe our commentary at thebridgehead.ca will know that, of course, parental rights are under attack. But let's take a look at what federally funded trans activist Faye Johnstone, who's the executive director of Queer Momentum, says. I'll just show you the video clip to give you an idea of where LGBT activists in this country are at with regard to the idea of parental rights.
I think we are seeing, it ties into the previous question. We're in an era of polarization where I think Canadians are having a harder time paying their bills, making ends meet, and supporting their families. And when you have that environment where life is harder, it becomes easier to channel that anger and to take advantage of that anger to gain power. I think in Canada right now, we're seeing this language around, so-called parental rights, this reference to gender ideology. And so we're using these as a distraction instead of delivering on healthy schools and happy.
So there you have it. Apparently, all of those parents who have come out to protests, who have lobbied their politicians about parental rights, about kids being transitioned against the will of their parents or without the knowledge of their parents, apparently those people are just, using their kids as a distraction to make a power grab. And parental, most notably there, Johnstone says, so-called parental rights. In other words, they don't even recognize parental rights as a valid concept. They just basically portray it as a cheap excuse for bigotry or vote grabbing. Now, it was really revealing to see the immediate response from Canadian progressives to Jivani's petition, because immediately they mocked the idea that any action is needed at all. So MP Nate Erskine Smith snarked, those liberals and their woke identity politics, wait a minute. Erskine Smith, incidentally, I noted, has been very vociferous about the need to combat Islamophobia, but has been uncharacteristically silent about the fact that more than 100 churches have been attacked or burned down entirely over the past several years. Now, the fact that progressive politicians have been largely quiet while churches get set ablaze, I think is evidence of precisely the problem Jivani is referring to. And Max Fawcett, a columnist for the National Observer, also chimed in. He said, "So much of contemporary conservatism revolves around cultivating and validating a sense of victimhood in groups that aren't actually victims." Now, he said this on X, and then he mocked the idea that Christians are victims. And so I asked him on X just one question. If over 100 mosques have been burned down or attacked, would you refer to Muslims as victims in that instance? And I would. If there was over 100 mosques in Canada that have been burned down or otherwise attacked, I think it would be fair to say the Muslim community was being victimized. Just like if over 100 churches have been burned down or attacked, I think it's reasonable to say the people who use those places of worship have been victimized in that sense. And of course, he didn't answer at all. Now, this is where Vice President-elect JD Vance weighed in. Now, for those of you wondering, well, why would he take notice of this? One, Vance is a pretty online guy in a lot of ways and keeps track of this kind of stuff. But he's also a good friend of Jamil Jivani. They met at Yale, I believe. And he quote tweeted Fawcett to set the record straight. And here's what the Vice President-elect said, quote, "Canada has seen a number of church burnings in recent years thanks to anti-Christian bigotry. All over the world, Christians are the most persecuted religious group. Jamil is speaking the truth. Shame on journalists who refuse to see what's obvious." Now, Fawcett, who is allegedly a journalist, apparently did not notice what the incoming American vice president did notice, that Canada's culture is becoming increasingly hostile to Christians. Now, if arson attacks on churches aren't enough for him, perhaps Fawcett could consider the fact that in 2021, there were more police-reported hate crimes against Christians than Muslims. Here's a graph that illustrates that fact. If you take a look at it, you can see there were more police-reported hate crimes against Christians. I'll bet you didn't read a single article in any of Canada's major newspapers that said hate crimes against Christians on the rise. Why? Because Christians are not convenient victims. And as I said in an earlier podcast, progressives don't see Canadian Christians so much as part of our multicultural patchwork. They see Christianity not as Canada's founding value system, but as Canada's original sin. Here, by the way, is another graph that illustrates that same trend. I think it pretty clearly highlights the fact that hate crimes against Christians are on the rise. So again, I just think the double standard here really highlights what's going on. If over 100 mosques were attacked, or 100 temples, or 100 gurdwaras, maybe not 100 synagogues based on how things have been going over the last 6 months, but I think, Erskine Smith and Fawcett and Trudeau and the rest of Canada's progressive establishment, would they be howling bloody murder about this nonstop, and rightly so. But Trudeau would be immediately hosting solemn press conferences in which he would be announcing that this is not who we are as Canadians and expressing his zero tolerance for hate while wearing what he imagines to be his most prime ministerial face. But when there's a rise in hate crimes against Christians, zero mentions. Nothing. This is not news worth covering if you're a progressive politician running this country. And that's not surprising, but much of the agenda that Jivani is describing has actually been spearheaded by the Prime Minister and his ideological fellow travelers, and that's why I think Jivani's call to action is necessary and timely. Canada is going to be facing some very interesting negotiations with the incoming Trump administration in the years to follow, and it's interesting to note that Vice President-elect JD Vance is concerned about anti-Christian bigotry and church burnings in Canada. I wonder if that discussion will play any part and the relationship between our two countries going forward. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of The Bridgehead. If you want to check out this podcast on other platforms, you can get us wherever you get your content. If you'd like to contribute to the discussion, please do feel free to drop a comment. If I've missed anything or there's another story that you want me to cover, please do make that comment as well. If you have any strong disagreement, weigh in that way. Or if you enjoyed the content and found it helpful, please do like, share, or subscribe. Thanks so much.